It's the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David talks to documentary filmmaker Jonathan Robinson. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome to everyone at home, and I would normally say our studio audience to the weekly show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. I say normally because we usually shoot the show before a small studio audience at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, but we are still in the last few weeks of shooting from home due to coronavirus concerns. In fact, this is just a green screen. Hey, Marty, can you put me in outer space? So, Kid Rock is under fire after he hurled a homophobic slur on stage at a Tennessee bar. In a related story, Kid Rock is rumored to be the new spokesperson for Chick-fil-A. And recently reinstated legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin just announced on CNN that he's writing a new book. It's expected to include a foreword by Pee Wee Herman. According to the World Health Organization, a super strain of highly infectious gonorrhea is now spreading like wildfire. Even so, ABC is still moving forward with season 17 of The Bachelorette. And Us Weekly is reporting that Rob Kardashian is dating a mystery woman. All that's known about her is that she has low standards. Oh, and a happy belated birthday to Morgan Freeman, who just turned 83. Unfortunately, plans for a documentary about his life have been canceled. Yeah, it seems they couldn't find a suitable narrator. On the legal front, a federal judge recently ruled that Target's 2013 data breach, where 40 million customers had their credit card information stolen, is not going to be covered by its insurance. That's almost as bad as when I wore a red shirt into Target. Canadian bankers are frustrated with still having to conduct transactions using pennies, which Canada began phasing out in 2013. And Americans are frustrated that Canada has yet to phase out Nickelback.
Never made it as a wise man.
On tonight's show, we've got a fantastic guest and a fantastic story. Close Encounters of the Third Kind was a blockbuster movie when it was released in 1977. Not only was it a massive moment for the film industry, but also for our local history. Many of the most famous scenes from that movie were shot right here on the Gulf Coast. Stick around, because we have director Jonathan Robinson here to tell us all about his documentary, Who Are You People? So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Our featured guest tonight is here to chat about one of the Gulf Coast's most interesting moments over the past 40 years, and one that has left a permanent mark on so many in our viewing area. His documentary, Who Are You People?, playing off the famous line from the film, attempts to tell the story and all of its impacts from the point of view of the locals who experienced it. Here to chat about the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, please give a warm weekly show welcome to director of Who Are You People?, Jonathan Robinson. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, David, for having me. I appreciate it.
So before we start talking about this massive moment in our local cultural history, where did you grow up?
Mobile, Alabama, born and raised.
So you are from here?
Yes, sir.
That is awesome. So what first got you interested in the local stories around Close Encounters?
When I was obviously was not born in the time period of which I could have seen it in the theater, born in 76. So by being able to watch it on ABC when they re-aired it in the 80s, my mother would sit there with me because she was an avid sci-fi fan, and she would kind of point out tips about certain scenes that were shot in West Mobile. Obviously, a good majority, 80% of the film was shot in Alabama and Baldwin County as well. And the point was like, well, where exactly? She could never specify, where those scenes were located. And besides, the hangar there at Berkeley Airfield, that was what everybody pretty much knew. But other than that, I wanted the finer details.
So when did you first start to hear stories or learn about the actual history beyond just the hangar?
Well, obviously with the advent of the internet, there's a lot of information that would start to trickle through in regards to certain areas that, especially the neighborhood where the Nearys, that Roy and Ronnie, the neighborhood they lived in, the house they lived in, was located in the Overlook subdivision behind USA. And that was one of those first little chunky tidbits that kind of came out through searching on the internet. But I wanted to know more, especially with a lot of the deleted scenes that we would not see in the theatrical release.
So did you have any movies that you saw growing up besides this one that made you stop and go, I want to do whatever that is?
Yes, sir. I think like a lot of us of my age group and a little bit older, we were enamored with what Spielberg was producing, especially what George was producing, George Lucas. But then you get into the finer artistic realm of individuals like John Milius, or individuals that go back into the foreign film aspect. But I think from a pop culture standpoint, it's always going to be Spielberg that stands out foremost in our minds from the age bracket that I'm considered part of.
When you guys were making the documentary, you were pretty far removed in time from the events themselves. So what were the logistical challenges of getting a documentary like this made so far off?
It was literally starting with the bare bones of information and letting it kind of snowball into more and more information.
How does a movie like Close Encounters ever find its way to Mobile, Alabama, of all places?
Because we had exactly what the producers were looking for. And the catalyst was those hangars. They sent scouts out there. They looked at it, gave it the green light, and that's how Mobile, Alabama has become synonymous with Close Encounters.
Did Mobile even have a film office at the time? I mean, how did they logistically manage to make this film?
Not technically Mobile. Up in Montgomery, there was a semblance of one in the sense of individuals who were in control of the interior of the state as well. They served the interests of the interior.
Now, what are some of the other iconic locations and scenes that were shot here? I mean, maybe we can go through a little bit of each and the story behind them. The first one I was made aware of was the house in Carlisle off Overlook Drive in Mobile. What did you learn about that location?
Well, it's one of those situations where they were obviously looking for that house, and they were looking for a house that for rent that they could get up in there and do whatever they wanted. And it was one of the individuals out of Montgomery, one of the Alabama representatives there, that basically said, what you might want to do is flat out buy the house, brand new, do whatever the heck you want to do with it. And then you can just put it back together because you have a construction crew that's always on standby, and then you put it back on the market. And that's exactly what they did.
So do you know the story of how they found the country house in Baldwin County? I mean, what's the story there? I mean, I think the house is still there pretty much the same as it was in the film, no?
It is, absolutely. And that owner, it stayed within that particular family for a long time, I believe, through the 80s and 90s up into this century as well. Joe Alves, I know, had gotten some sort of lead on it's supposed to be a country house that looks like Muncie, Indiana.
So one that I didn't know that was shot here was a railroad scene. It was shot in Bay Minette. Can you tell us what you learned about that?
So the railroad crossing sequence. I'm sorry, excuse me. The evacuation sequence is what you're referring to.
Yeah, in Bay Minette.
So yes, sir. So that aspect is supposed to stand in for Gillette, Wyoming, and so there's even signs on the depot. And the depot, obviously, I think, as you know, has been moved from its original location and turned into the JC, not JC, but it's like the city hall, I guess, of the area. They actually, put it on a truck and moved the entire building itself from the L&N railroad line that used to actually have control of that line. I think it's CSX now that owns it, but L&N was the name of that railroad. As it stood in for Gillette, Wyoming in the story, all the townspeople are evacuating, and so they needed tons of Mobilians to stand in as farmhands and just families that literally were trying to evacuate because of this threat of gas and anthrax, I meant to say. Yeah. So with that being said, it was a hot, really nasty weekend. They did it in June of 1976, and that particular summer was gruesome. It was just a brutal summer that a lot of people recollect. And again, it was a chance for family members to kind of be with each other and make a little bit of money, because you're only making $2.30 an hour at that time as an extra. And they seem to have all had a great time doing it. But again, you kind of feel like, cattle.
So, Jonathan, we've got to go to a quick commercial break, pay the bills. Can you stick around till after the break?
Yes, sir.
Did any story stick out to you in particular as you worked on this project?
Yeah, there was some neat little heartwarming ones, especially one gentleman that tells of watching the deleted scenes that eventually became available on the DVD, I think at the beginning of this century. This gentleman had been able, his mother had taken him and his other siblings to be a part of the movie. They shot a couple of scenes that were never even introduced, and his own mother was in a sequence. So he remembers that all occurring, but none of that would come to light until this DVD was released. And so he's sitting around with his children, with whom his mother never really ever saw. And this gentleman wrote me all this. I saw this first in email. I didn't see it as it was photographed for the documentary. But when I read it, his email, I was just smitten by the fact that this is the first time that his children were able to see their grandmother, and in celluloid form, technically.
Yeah, she's kind of immortalized in that sense.
That's right, and it's amazing to see something that he could only, tell verbally.
Well, speaking of that, can you tell us about some of the more obscure people that you talked to? I mean, who were they, and what was the general feeling of from a story standpoint?
I'm indebted to every last individual that got up with me, because they could have shut the door in my face. They didn't know me from Adam, and I had no right to even ask them about their story, quite honestly, and yet they graciously gave. The two individuals that stick out in my mind, first and foremost, was Mary Gaffney, and she would play Mrs. Harris in the movie, the nosy next door neighbor, the one from which he stole the chicken wire and the ducks went free in her yard. That lady was an unending amount of entertainment to me, and I was able to hold a relationship with her up until her death. Until this past year, in January of this year. And then the other individual that comes to mind is Jack Rupert, who's no longer alive either. But he's just one of those kind of silly he's still a silly young boy, even when I spoke to him in his 50s. And you could tell he was still kind of living the 1970s as he relived those moments for me.
After watching the film, it almost feels like everyone of a certain age has some sort of connection to it. I mean, I had no idea John Ed Thompson was in the film. Was that the kind of feeling you got as you researched and interviewed?
Absolutely. It's neat to know that some of the individuals that we take for granted as being here in Mobile all of our lives, watching them on TV, to know that he was up in one of those modules as a scientist. And he was, I think, a Dr. Barometer or Dr. He has a meteorological pun to his name that they put on his ID badge. And it's people in the civics standpoint of like Gary Greeno and Bay Hayes, individuals, old names like that when it comes to Mobile, and what it took to actually get this pushed through from a not really a legislative standpoint, but one that would require someone to sign off on allowing this to all happen. And of course, George Wallace at the time, who was governor, putting forth a particular day as, Columbia Pictures Day or whatever it was, with one of the producers. So even he kind of got on the bandwagon, about how fun this was, and what the possibilities of more of it coming to Alabama, because I think that's something that's really lost. And I might get on my soapbox here, because I feel that Alabama has lost quite an opportunity by not taking advantage as the states of Louisiana and Georgia have done in the past 10 plus years. And I would think that Alabama would only the worst thing that could happen is they could only grow their own coffers, and I'm a living testament. I'm a son of Mobile. I'm a son of Alabama. And the thing is that I would want what is best for Alabama.
So how exactly did you go about tracking these people down? I mean, was it word of mouth, crew lists?
It was word of mouth. It was me starting off with at least one person that I knew had been a part of it. It was finding a list of individuals at one point to see who may know someone else, and then of course finding out, well, that person passed away a long time ago, or even while I was calling people, there was one individual who passed away before I could even get a follow-up interview. At one point, there was a auction that was going on with the prop store in Los Angeles, and they had a production binder from the second AD, Jim Bloom. So I decided to buy that for $1,500, and within this binder was just
treasure
chock
trove.
Full, lists of names, lists
That's
of
$1,500 you spent.
Absolutely. I call that an investment, and that's how I had to basically convince my wife. It's like, look, it's research. I'll write it off if I have to.
That's how I convinced my wife to let me get a hovercraft. We're going to use it in a commercial. Then we did. So as I watch the documentary, it really comes out just how much community, and I mean normal, everyday folks, how much community effort went into making this film. People volunteering their cars, their homes, or different kinds of little things. It's just kind of amazing to me. Did that surprise you?
Not at all, because I mean, we talk about Southern hospitality as one of those things that people from other regions of the nation experience as they travel or whatever, visiting other family members that live down here. In this sense, you can't get any more foreign than Hollywood. And as it was described in, I think, a Huntsville newspaper, not since the British invasion during the War of 1812 had there been an army descending upon Mobile, and such incredulity at first, I would say, because the fact that some of the people are like, well, what does Columbia Pictures want with us down here? Like, am I missing something? Are we, this can't just be a bunch of money falling into our lap. It just doesn't happen like that. So you must want something. And so they looked at it like
Barat
that.
didn't exist then.
What? Right. It's they didn't know really what to make of it at first. As the schedule progressed, there was so much more. I will bend over backwards for you. You let me know. You need how many cops at this corner? We can do that. You need that road shut down? We can do that too.
It's truly amazing when you realize just how many people are impacted by films and the making of films. I mean, I produce a lot of commercials, and people don't realize that it does, you use the word army, it takes a small army just to produce 30 seconds of quality footage.
As opposed to my professional life, when I'm part of a film crew, I'm one of hundreds of individuals. And that is the truth, because those things have to be made by a village. Quite honestly, those whether it be a television show or a major motion picture feature. In the respect of this documentary that we're speaking of, I kept it as low key as possible. I surrounded myself with individuals like John Thompson and Drew Hall, who I knew could help me with their own skills to get exactly what I needed, but with only a promissory note of, look, I can't pay you anything. I can do something for you on the back end if it's possible, and that's the only promise I can give you. And those people still said, I'm willing to help you.
So I'm curious if there's another documentary like yours out there, a documentary from the perspective of the extras and the normal everyday people who worked on a particular film. Do you know of any? It seems like what happened here and how it's lived on seems a little more unique.
Well, I did try to approach it like that. Nothing really came to mind at the time. And while in 2010 I was working on the documentary, there was a book that was put out called Memories from Martha's Vineyard. And that was about Jaws back in 1974 when they were making that in Massachusetts. And, of course, the two authors there were doing the exact same thing I was doing, but in book form. So I felt all of a sudden like, oh, like, oh, I'm going to be looked at as a copycat when
well, no, you're
eventually
filling a gap that it seems like you'd be filling a gap that didn't exist.
It is, and it's so funny that two disassociated individuals from two parts of the nation would want to, set upon two different Spielberg opuses and basically, attack it from the same angle. And so I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. I mean, so I'm not doing his movie, he's not doing my movie. So technically, we're doing two different things that are kind of coming to the same goal. Other than that, I'm sure I'm missing something, because I tried to I wanted to be as unique as possible.
Now, I know that the focus was more on, the locals, but is there maybe a favorite story involving Spielberg that you learned, or maybe one involving Richard Dreyfuss that you heard while interviewing people?
Yeah, there's Spielberg just seemed to be that proverbial child on set, that everything was new and wondrous to him. No one really had anything negative to say about Spielberg at that time. Obviously, Jaws had gone way over budget. Close Encounters would go way over budget, but he would help Columbia Pictures from basically going to bankruptcy at that time. Yeah. A lot hinged upon that movie. With Dreyfuss, it was like really wrangling a child, because he was just coming off the high of Jaws, and he could do no wrong, and he liked his ladies, and he liked his video games, and any other extracurricular activities. Those were kind of the ones that intrigued me the most.
So tell us what you're up to now, Jonathan, and where can our audience go to catch the documentary?
So the documentary can be seen on Amazon Prime. If you are a subscriber to that platform, it is absolutely free, and you should have no trouble. All you just really need to do is type in "Who Are You People?" That is the name of the documentary, and you should be able to be entertained for the next hour and a half. Currently, I am just a simple second assistant cameraman. I've been doing it for over 20 years. I've been blessed to be in the industry. Again, like I said, coming out of Mobile, Alabama, I thought I'd have to move out to New York or LA, and that just wasn't in the cards. As it turned out, there's plenty of production here on the Gulf Coast, up in Georgia. New Orleans has been just a powerhouse of production. Yeah.
Again, the documentary is titled "Who Are You People?" You can find it on Amazon Prime. Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for joining us, Jonathan Robinson.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, David.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to director Jonathan Robinson for joining us. Taking us home tonight, still filling in for our house band, the Mojiles, is my son, Gianni.